What's up, everybody? This is the Good Kraken podcast. My name is Ernell Pearson. I am your host, alongside tonight with Jenesy Gabrielle. How you doing, Jenesy?
I'm good. How are you?
I am extravagant. I'm excited. This is going to be a fun night. We're talking about some really, really awesome stuff. How was your day?
It was excellent. I got a bench today.
A bench. Okay, now what kind of bench? What kind of bench are we talking here?
I got a front porch bench. So like the vision for the bench was to like cozy up with a book and some tea. And
Okay,
I'm very
okay.
excited.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Do you plan on giving this bench a lot of decor and making it look lovely, or because what good is a bench if not decked out to the best of your ability to look the part, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it has to be like an attraction, right?
Right.
We've had a front porch for a few months now. And I really wanted a bench for this front porch. So I've been like marinating on it for several months. And we finally decided on like a theme for
Okay.
the
Okay.
bench. It's strawberries. It's going to be like a strawberry, like cottage core, like kind of think like vintage strawberry shortcake inspired bench.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That sounds so much fun. I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it. Do you have any more like furniture that you're needing to get to duel up with it, or?
No, we're really just we have the bench cushion, which we had to go to like 5 different stores to find a bench cushion. It was
Really?
yeah. Yes.
Who,
Yes.
who would have thought the stimulus that had people out there buying all the furniture cushions?
I don't know if it was, I mean, there were places that had furniture cushions, like the outdoor cushions that we were looking for, kind of,
Mhm.
but it was like a size thing and then also style. Like we just wanted a plain red cushion, and they were like, "No,
It
but
was
Lowe's
fate.
pulled through."
Oh, of course, of course. Fate was not on your side today,
No,
but
it was,
that's okay.
although it kind of was because we had gone to 5 stores, we were exhausted, we still had to like steam clean our carpets, and so I was like, I'm gonna go in Lowe's and I'm gonna look, and if it's not in Lowe's, we're going home and we're looking another day. And I found it as soon as I walked through the doors. I saw this cushion, and I was like, "You're it."
Oh, then fate was very much on your side. Then it took a
It
second. Fate
really
had
was.
to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was like, well, it was like you finally found your themes, so you have to work for its realization now.
Of
So now
course.
we're just looking for like kind of throw pillows and stuff like that to really make the strawberry look come together.
Oh, perfect. Well, I can't wait to see it. Now, Jenesy, you are from a special podcast called Let's Get Bitchin. Tell the listeners at home what Let's Get Bitchin is a little bit about here.
Yeah, so Let's Get Bitchin' is really just a spot for me and my friends and other people in community with me are can come and bitch specifically about queering media. So I am queer. I That's actually how I know Ernell is through my lovely fiance.
The wonderful.
And um being a part of the queer community, I find that it is just so hard to find meaningful representation in queer characters. A lot
Yes.
of times when we have queer characters, they are put into kind of like a pre-designated straight role, right?
Mm.
Or they're tokenized, and we don't see a lot of what I would consider very authentic queer characters who are just out here living life and being queer and falling in love and falling out of love and being upset and all of those wonderful things that are just part of being human and being in different relationships. And so Let's Get Bitchin' is a spot where we come and we appreciate or critique. I should say, and we always critique.
Yes, of course, of course, of course.
Different media, some of which are inherently queer. So one of the first things we talked about was a movie called Dashing in December, which is a gay cowboy Christmas movie.
Oh my god, I love it. I love it so much.
It's
Okay.
wonderful. And other times we talk about things that are not inherently queer, but have queer messages or have
Okay.
applications to queer experiences and queer relationships. One of the big ones I've talked about so many times on my podcast is Taylor Swift, who is out as heterosexual, but
Hmm.
has a lot of queer themes in her music.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so that is what specifically when we use the term queering media, that's what we're talking about. Taking media that isn't inherently queer and queering it. And
Okay,
seeing
okay.
how it can be applied to the queer experience.
Awesome, beautiful. Well, I love it because that definitely makes for the content that people need to hear. That's for damn sure. 'Cause, I mean, the talk about being queer and being under
Mhm.
the spectrum of the LGBTIA plus community. It's important to talk about these things. I know earlier we were talking a little bit about the direction towards focusing a little bit on people of color during my last few shows. But that was a big part of why I was excited to have you on too, is because the queer perspective is a part of what we're about as far as focusing on the marginalized peoples of this world, because just as you said, we're all fucking normal people. We're all normal people and we all have opinions and we all like media, and there's nothing about enjoying media that makes us any different just because we are marginalized. So
Yep.
absolutely, I love the work that you're doing over there. I actually got a chance to listen to a little bit of it. I kind of went in wanting to kind of hear what your guys' show is about, so I took a listen the other day, and you're doing some pretty damn awesome stuff. The conversations you have on that is lit. It's super lit.
Yeah.
I love it. Yes, absolutely. Everybody at home, definitely check out Let's Get Bitchin' podcast. You can find it on basically all podcast platforms,
Yeah.
I'm assuming. Yeah.
Yep. We're everywhere. Yeah.
Awesome. Beautiful, beautiful. And I will definitely will be having a link that's going to be on the YouTube video for this and on the podcast episode itself for people to be able to go to, because we want to be able to support you guys in a way that's going to be pushing you guys in the right direction. So I want to support you guys in any way that we possibly can. With that said, as I said earlier, this is the Good Kraken podcast, a show for marginalized people, bringing you the video game, movie, and TV news, discussions, and reviews that you want to hear about. As I said before, my name's Arnell Pearson. This is Jenesy, and we tonight are going to be doing things a little bit differently, because tonight we are expending an entire episode on the goodness that was WandaVision. We are both huge fans of the MCU, and tonight we wanted to invest a little bit of time to talk about some of the themes and wonderful things that WandaVision had given us all as an audience and as fans of the MCU. We're going to be diving into quite a few subjects when it comes to this. Kind of going before into that, we got to do a little bit of housekeeping here. If you have Amazon Prime, you have Twitch Prime, please, 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 please give us that subscription. If you are not giving it to anybody else, we would very much be grateful for it. We are just a starting up podcast, and we would like to have every single one of you be a part of this. If you do subscribe, you get the show ad free. You get to see the show live without any of the ads and so on and so forth. And you get to see it earlier than when we put it up on podcasts and YouTube. So lots of wonderful benefits for that. Please, please, please join us. It would be great to have you guys. With that said, I think we can kind of just dive straight into the good stuff here. Jenesy, I think we're ready to go. I know that we talked a little bit before we hopped on here, but there's still lots more to talk about. So, as I mentioned, we're talking about WandaVision, and WandaVision is a gift. It's a gift. And I'm pretty sure you and I both can agree to that statement.
Oh yeah.
Um
Yes.
WandaVision is just one of the most wonderful things to have happen to us in the past just chaotic year that was this pandemic. And I know earlier we discussed how Disney making the decision to release this televised MCU content was one a really really great decision on their part as far as a business decision is concerned, but also to service us fans. And one of the first things that I kind of wanted to touch on here, going straight into this topic, was when diving into the show, starting out a little bit, none of us really expected what the show was going to be about.
Yeah.
When going into the first episode and seeing that it was going to be a sitcom, what were your initial thoughts going into this, knowing what you knew about Wanda and Vision prior to the show ever even starting?
I was so apprehensive, I'll be honest. So I remember when Disney Plus first came out, I'll give a little bit of backstory into where I was coming in. I'm big in the Disney spheres as well.
Right.
I'm from a town very close to Anaheim, California. So I grew up very close, not just to Disneyland, but to Pixar Studios, Disney Animation Studios, all of those things. And growing up there, you're around a lot of Disney.
Right.
And
Right.
so I saw so many conversations about the kind of like, oh my gosh, Disney Plus is a new streaming site. They're not going to have enough to put out. How are they going to compete with Netflix and Hulu and all of these places that have
Hmm.
so many other different networks that they're pulling from? And I really feel like when WandaVision first came out, I was kind of like, okay, so they're really trying to enter the originals, right? And they've done it with a few other Disney things. They had like High School Musical, the musical, the series. They had like a few like different kids shows that were Disney
Right.
Plus originals.
Right.
And
Right.
they were like, well, we have this untapped resource that nobody else has, and that is the MCU.
Hmm.
Um, I was very intrigued because something that I think sets these originals apart from anything else the MCU has ever done is that they are series that are MCU canon.
Yes.
So going into it, I was so pumped to see what they were going to use this to bring in like a whole new medium. But I was also like, well, is the production going to be different or at a lesser value
Hmm.
because it's a TV show? So I was a bit concerned about that because we've had plenty of Marvel TV shows that are just not up to MCU par. And then we have the sitcom side of things. And I was like, well, I don't really come to Marvel for a sitcom.
Hmm.
You know, if I
Right.
wanted a sitcom, I'd watch a sitcom. And Marvel slapped me across the face.
Even just in the first episode, though, right? I mean,
Yes.
going like towards near the end of the episode, and
Mhm.
things start getting a little bit weird. Again, just to let viewers know, we're doing spoiler free for the first half of this, so you guys are safe for now. We're not going to dive into any spoilers in the second half of this, so you guys are more than welcome to hang out and talk about this with us. If you guys are in the chat, you're more than welcome to pop in some questions and conversations too. So just let you guys know. Near the end of the episode, things get a little wild, and it is a weird transition going
Yes.
from what we expected the show to be about, and
Yes.
even just right off the bat, like saying like, okay, this is not everything that we thought it was going to be. And
Yeah.
obviously, like, they showed some insinuation with that, with the trailers, with the
Yeah.
advertisements and everything like that too. But oh, I'm sure we did not expect what we got out of this show.
No. I
And
wasn't ready.
yeah, yeah, right, yeah, 100%. It's it's interesting to think because when I first started it, I was kind of like, okay, sitcom, like
Yeah.
sitcom based on Marvel characters that we have been invested with for, I think it was probably about 8 movies at the point that we originally got Wanda.
Mhm.
Because I'm pretty sure Age of Ultron was like the seventh or eighth, something like that. I can't remember. Well, we'll fact check later. But the these characters that we were so invested in, getting a different dynamic in their content, as far as seeing them in a different light, seeing them in a different scenario that wasn't just combat. I'm going just to destroy
Yeah.
Ultron. Like it just the craziness that is the Marvel movies, and so
Yeah.
it was interesting to go into with that. Now, moving into the middle of the season there, we started getting even more glimpses of the expanded universe that they were trying to give us in the show. And
Mhm.
holy shit. Now where like just the way that they turned so many tables in this show was so interesting. I kind of want to touch a little bit on going into that, the second
Mhm.
half of the show where things are completely awry. Like,
Yeah.
where did you sit as far as being a fan of MCU and finally starting to kind of get some of the things that we were originally hoping for, outside
Right.
of expecting it to be a sitcom? Where were you on that?
I it was kind of jarring because at that point we had like 4 episodes, I think, 3 or 4 episodes of
Mhm.
the sitcom world, and things, at the end of each episode and kind of throughout, you had little nods that something wasn't quite right, and you had these, as you put it, like tables turning, um, that created this sense of drama that sitcoms don't have
Mhm.
and Marvel movies don't have in this way. I mean, Marvel movies are dramatic in a certain way, but not in this. It was a very nuanced sort of drama. And going into the show, you know that Vision is obviously half of the show. And at the end of Endgame, there was no Vision, or at the beginning
Right.
of Endgame, there was no Vision. And so there's already you enter it with a lot of confusion. And so they're building this up, right? And you get to episode, I think it's like episode 4, and I'm invested in this sitcom. Start to
Goodness,
be
right, right.
invested in this weird WandaVision sitcom, and I'm like, "What's happening?" Like, and the internet is swarming with theories of how Vision is here and what's happening with Wanda and why are all these things happening? And then they kind of cut to the what we would consider as the traditional Marvel world. And
Mhm.
so I was jarred, but I was also very excited because we got to see a lot of characters. One character, Agent Chen, is that his
Yes.
name?
Yes.
Yeah. Who we've seen before, who is now, I think, safe to say, the star of the internet.
Oh, absolutely. The internet's been ablaze with his magic tricks. Not seeing him since Ant-Man. That was incredible way to finally get a callback to something prior to that, and that wasn't just some of the other characters in the show.
Yeah.
The comic relief that we got with him was incredible. I loved it so much.
He was perfect, and he brought the traditional, like, Marvel comedy.
Right, right.
We talked a bit about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which has that very traditional Marvel comedy that is unparalleled. It's very different from any other sort of comedy that you have because you need a certain type of humor to ice the cake of what is otherwise somewhat traumatic.
Right. Well, and also too, you kind of have to have a level of know-how when it comes to the MCU in general, because like I noticed that a lot of the not only just the humor, but a lot of just the like major plot beats and themes and so on and so forth are really projected on the idea that we're 17 movies in, and it's like
Yeah.
having this entire universe that we've built up on for the past more than a decade now, like there's so much to be had when it comes to the humor, when it comes to the themes, which we'll get into here in a second, that really hit because of the investment that we've all had in these characters prior to when
Mhm.
it happens. And so it's remarkable that the way that they did it. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's different, so different than any other piece of content that we could possibly have.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. Well, now to kind of move into the overall general themes of the show here, because I kind of wanted to get a second to talk about like our opinions on the mood that they set in the show, because the mood is so different between the first half of the show and the second half of the show.
Mhm.
And again, no spoilers here, so you guys don't worry, but there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the actual emotion and the feel and the tone and the characteristics of the show that most other Marvel content has only just very little given us. And having a show that's giving us almost, what was it, 9 hours, 8 hours of content as a whole, rather than just a 2.5, 3 hour like movie, there was so much space to be able to touch on things that the movies weren't able to touch on. I wanted to see how you felt a little bit about the general change in tone going from the first half of the show to the second half.
I Like I said, at first I was feeling jarred, right? Because I felt like I got committed to this first half of the show, and now we were switching back formats, and I didn't get that resolution of what had just happened. So there was that. But overall, it was seamless.
Oh,
It was I really truly felt so. here's what I will say. I I don't like watching things week to week, but I had to because I exist on the internet and I didn't
Right.
want it to be spoiled for me. Um, so in the process of it, like week to week, it did not feel seamless.
Mhm.
It felt jarring. That's really the best way I can put it. I felt each week like I was entering a new realm of hell, like of Marvel hell,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Not in a bad way. I mean, Lil Nas X just took us to hell and it was really exciting.
Oh, yeah, it
But
was. Yeah, it fucking was.
so like not to say that, it was a bad, like each week I was just entering a new realm of like confusion and what's happening, and each week I grew more and more committed to WandaVision. I went in very apprehensive, and kind of like, oh, I'll take it or leave it. Like, I'm going to try it because it's a Marvel thing and I need to be in the loop. And I left just feeling like it was done the way that they brought together not just the sitcom and like this traditional Marvel format, but all of the themes of it that were, you had like the superhero themes of like tying together her character, tying together who Wanda is, who Vision is, where they're at, and moving into phase 4. They did that, but they also brought a humanity to it.
Right,
Um,
right.
in both parts, right? In the sitcom part, and then even in the second part that we're talking about, where we switch to the traditional MCU format, they're bringing in a humanity that we just have not seen, I feel like, in Marvel movies. I mean, they started doing it with Tony Stark and Spider-Man,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We saw a real connection there, and I mean, Spider-Man. It's really Spider-Man.
Oh,
Spider-Man
Pete.
is Peter Parker is just carrying the MCU on his little back sometimes.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what?
yeah.
Especially when it came to Iron Man. I feel like that redemption arc that Iron Man got was in big part to fucking Peter Parker.
Right, right.
But we're not here to talk about that.
We could do a whole damn other podcast when it comes to Peter Parker in this, you know?
Tom Holland's Spider-Man has my heart.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't mess with this whole like prior Spider-Man bullshit anymore. I don't do it. I'm not doing
You
it. I'm not
can't.
entertaining it. Okay? Tom Holland is our Spider-Man now, and I will not have it any other way.
And honestly, like, it's not fair. Like, it's not fair to everyone else is like, oh, well, they were for Spider-Man first and they're my Spider. I'm like, no, it's not fair to put them next to Tom Holland.
Oh,
They're going to
100%. Yeah.
lose.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Of course.
Not just because he is Spider-Man, but because he is a part of the MCU. And the other Spider-Mans were a part of Sony.
Mm.
Disney and I know we're getting to the contentious issues here. I'm sorry.
I know.
Start
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm gonna start a fight, and then I swear we're gonna go back to talking about WandaVision. Disney and Marvel,
Mhm.
MCU, have
Mhm.
done things with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole that no one else has done. DC cannot do it. Sony cannot do it. They try and they fail, and it's sad. And then you watch Justice League, and you're like, honey, you're
Yeah.
trying to be Marvel, and you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and that is not only does Tom Holland play an excellent, fun, sarcastic, witty Spider-Man, but he is integrated into a bigger sequence of characters and storylines that makes his Spider-Man much more dynamic.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Which is also bringing it back to why we're here today, is what makes WandaVision so special.
Mhm.
Because you start off with something that seems so separate from the MCU. You start off with this sitcom, and then you get to episode 4 or 5, and you're back in the regular MCU, like where we left off at Endgame,
Right,
and
right.
and it makes sense, and it shouldn't, but MCU does that.
They're very good at it. They're very good at doing that. You know, like they have a way of saying, "Hey, this is what you want." And then you say, "No, we don't." And they say, "No, this is what you want." And then we say, "Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Marvel. That's exactly what we wanted."
Right? then you get to the end of episode 8 and you're the child that didn't know what they wanted, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, it's perfect. Yeah, it's perfect. With kind of branching off of that though, too. I want us to take a moment to kind of like move away just from the general talk of the show, because I feel like now I feel like a majority of people have gotten a chance to see the show, and I want to end this part of our talk with this part of things to just sort of ask, would you recommend this for someone who's a fan of the MCU?
Who is or is not a fan of the MCU?
I would argue that there's some people. Are they actually people? Is the real question.
There are people out there who are not fans of the MCU.
Yeah, there are people who are out there that are not people.
I love it. Okay, so would I recommend this to fans of the MCU? I think that's a great question. So actually, my father is the person who can be credited with my addiction of Marvel.
Okay.
Obviously, cliche, right? But that's how it is. My dad, the workaholic, and like we as children, we would watch like that and Star Wars, you know, and that's how we would bond. And my dad and I will spend hours and hours and hours critiquing movies that we watched years ago. And it's like we're coming back to it. He's the reason I have this podcast, if we're really getting into it. And he was not intrigued by the Disney Plus originals, right? Yeah, he was just kind of like, oh, well, it's not a movie, it's a TV show, and like I don't know if he was also, my dad was one of those guys like, oh, well, yeah, of course they're giving them their own TV shows. They're the low build superheroes. I know. My dad's a little bit of an asshole.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, he's
a self-aware asshole.
Oh, right. I mean, not to interrupt, but I mean, he's not particularly wrong.
He's not.
Yeah, I mean, like that's kind of the reason they made the shows.
Mm-hmm. Because they're trying to bring them up. And I think that with WandaVision, I feel like that was a little bit less important to bring them up because Vision was already a really important character. Scarlet Witch in the comic books is fucking incredible. And so we're all just sitting here waiting patiently. Like, when is Scarlet Witch going to reach her full potential? You know? I feel like we all knew that was going to happen and we were somewhat invested in those characters. I'm really interested for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier because the Falcon and the Winter Soldier are both really interesting characters that to this point have been sidekicks.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Especially in the case of Sam, the Falcon, who is one of few Black characters in the MCU. And before the Black Panther, they had all been side characters.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing that I think that there was some concern before Endgame. We knew they were going to get rid of a bunch of the characters because their contracts were up, right? That wasn't a surprise to us. We knew who was leaving us at Endgame.
Right.
What we didn't know was where they were going to take us in Stage 4 or Phase 4.
Phase 4, yeah.
Are they going to bring in new characters? I mean, obviously, but at what point? Who's going to replace Captain America? And I am very excited that they're choosing to build on the Falcon rather than bring in someone entirely new. Which, funny enough, I won't say that. I won't say that. That's a spoiler.
Yeah, it's okay. No, that's totally fine because I think now we can probably move into that. I would say yes. I would recommend this show to people that are MCU fans and even not. I feel like this show is a very, very good entry into kind of getting a chance to feel out what the MCU is about if you're wanting to sort of get a taste of what MCU gives us as a whole. Definitely, absolutely watch WandaVision. Now, for the people that are fans of the MCU and just haven't gotten a chance to really go back and touch on it, or they haven't gotten Disney Plus or whatever, get Disney Plus and watch this damn show, okay? Yes. If you are an MCU fan and you are not watching these shows, you are failing our family, okay? And
Failing the MCU
You're
community.
failing us. We cannot have this. We cannot have it. Please, please, please watch this show. Everybody, you were about to say something though? I feel you coming in.
I'm gonna hop on that. So yes, I also would 100% recommend. I also feel that you cannot continue in the MCU without watching these series. You will be
Yes.
completely lost if you don't watch WandaVision.
Mhm.
Period. We aren't at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I can only imagine, because they're also canon MCU, that you will be totally lost if you
Yeah.
don't watch them.
Yes. Yes.
Another plug though for Disney Plus. Not only will you be able to watch all of the Marvel movies, even if you don't want to watch these originals, but now they're dropping behind the scenes shit.
Mhm.
Get Disney Plus. Do it.
Get Disney Plus and watch this content. Holy shit. You guys need to watch this. Absolutely. With that said though, I think we can kind of move into this next part of the show here for all of our listeners at home. If you have not watched this show and you don't want spoilers, leave now. Leave now, because we are going to get into the nitty-gritty about what had happened in WandaVision throughout the entirety of the series, okay? We're going to be talking about WandaVision, the themes that are in WandaVision, a lot of the details about what happens in the show. If you do not want spoilers, go now. Just letting you know now. If you're okay with spoilers, welcome to the second half of this.
We've arrived at the main event.
Oh man, we got somebody in the chat that's like, ah, shit. That's okay. Well, what we can do too is instead of talking exact details, which I'm sure we will, it's gonna be more focused on the overall like themes of the show itself. Anyways, so with that said, we're not necessarily wanting to just talk about each plot beat that happens in the show. We're mainly wanting to talk about the bare bones of what the show is about. And I want to kind of give this segment to you to kind of talk about the things that you were wanting to talk about going into this. But I want us I want to start us out here by firstly asking you, what theme of the show did you enjoy the most?
Oh, that's hard. There was a theme of, I think it's very general, but like a theme of growth,
Hmm.
right? And self-discovery, particularly for Scarlet Witch, but also for Vision. And that is really what stood out to me. And we can do spoilers now, so I'm gonna jump into why.
Yes.
So we know going into WandaVision that Vision is dead.
Mm-hmm.
He is dead. And we're all heartbroken. And then we come into this sitcom where Vision's alive and nothing happened. And we're so confused, and we're in the 50s and everything's in black and white. And Wanda's a housewife. Like, who thought that was gonna happen? Right? Like,
right.
Putting my money on anyone in the universe that I thought was gonna become a domestic housewife, Wanda Maximoff was not the person I was gonna bet on.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You know? Like, even for like she is a pretty heteronormative woman, she's very independent, very kick-ass, won't take shit from nobody, but she chose to put herself in a 50s sitcom, which is interesting. And so we start there, and then you have like there's just so many ways that she grows, which are shown through her going through decades, right? And we find out eventually that she has returned to this idyllic sitcom life that she saw in Sokovia with her parents on the TV, and they would sit around and watch sitcoms together. And so she's returning into the safety net of sitcoms and creating this world with Vision where she can be safe and happy, and they can have the family that they never got a chance to have, which is fucking heartbreaking when you find out that that's what we were doing this whole time, was living in denial.
Yeah.
And so you have so many different layers of her, like her and Vision growing through the decades, growing their family, their kids growing up, and then ultimately her growing through her grief and being able to let Vision go and let her family go. She had kids,
Mm.
you know? She manifested magically children that she raised and loved, and she let all of that go. Which I think was some incredible growth for her. And then of course she's growing into the Scarlet Witch.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
What about you? What about you?
Um I definitely feel like the growth thing is a favorite of mine as well, but my main, I guess you could say, sub theme that's underneath that would probably be the loss part, was the and how she deals with that grief, because I felt like that was sort of the catalyst in her getting the arc that she had throughout the entire show to get the growth that she actually needed, because it was arguably Wanda and Thor are probably the two characters that have lost the most in the
Oh yeah.
MCU. And
Mhm.
it's we got a chance to kind of deal with Thor's grief in Endgame and see
Mhm.
like what had become of him after the course of what had happened prior to Endgame and Infinity War and the Thor movies before that. And I mean, losing his dad, losing his mother, losing his brother, losing half of his friends, and feeling the guilt of him having had the chance to kill Thanos himself and he didn't.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
when we look at Wanda in comparison and contrast, she had lost her family, her mother, her father, her brother, the all half of her friends, the love of her life. And not to mention too, how many times is she going to have to watch the love of her life die? And I feel like that, like like
Let's place our bets now, folks, because
God,
they're really still young.
oh my goodness gracious. And so this poor woman, in dealing with her loss and dealing with her grief, moves into making a decision to deal with it in a way that is protecting her. And I felt that overall, junction into her not just dealing with grief that you see in other movies that are not in the MCU, but where we see other people dealing with their grief by seeing their friends and like, oh, it's gonna be okay, we love you, and they go home, they eat their ice cream, they watch a movie, they cry, and they deal with the grief gradually throughout that. With Wanda in this show, it's dealing with grief in the reality of dealing with it in an unhealthy way, and
Yeah,
then dealing it with it in a healthy way. And I feel
yeah.
like that contrast between both of those is super important for people to see, because dealing with loss and dealing with grief is not pretty. It's
No.
not always talking to your friends at breakfast and eating ice cream and watching your favorite movie. It's not always that. Sometimes it is locking yourself away from the world and not knowing who you are, not knowing what's going to happen, and having to lie to yourself to feel better. And
Yeah.
the human condition that they touch on in this show, I feel, is one of the most beautiful parts about this show, because they don't just deal with her being a superhero. They deal with her being human for all
Yes.
intents and purposes.
Yeah.
They deal with her going through very human emotions and very real
Mhm.
emotions, and those emotions, watching from an audience perspective, these are, and we mentioned this earlier, these are all things that Disney had failed to really touch on prior to the MCU, prior to these shows. There's so many themes and subjects that they've just never really dived into the way that they did in WandaVision, the way that they're doing in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And I appreciate what that they took the opportunity to not just, one, give us a moment with characters that were kind of just on the side of these heroes that we loved, but also humanizing these
Mhm.
characters, making us feel attached to them in a way that felt real, that felt like we can confide in them and are loving them because they are now actually more than what they were in the movies prior. So yeah, the reality of her dealing with her losses is absolutely my favorite part of that.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really great point of something that is so important about media. And you can't have anything where you talk about media, whether it's a podcast or an Instagram account or whatever, without talking about how we relate to media as people, right? You have an entire podcast around relating to media as a marginalized person. I have an entire podcast about relating media as a queer person. Um, and unfortunately, I think a lot of times that means looking at media and seeing where marginalized people and queer people are not, seeing where our stories are not told, or seeing how they're told in a way that isn't representative of us, right?
Yes.
Seeing where it missed the mark. And Marvel, when it comes to stories that really relate to what people are dealing with and what people are going through, they miss the mark. I love Marvel, and I think that in all media you can look. I mean, I listen to Taylor Swift songs and hear entire movies. You know what I mean? And it's just not that deep. You know?
Are you sure it's not? Are you sure? I feel like it is, and we're just telling ourselves that it's not.
I mean, sometimes it is. That's true.
We are Wanda in this scenario. We are Wanda Maximoff in this.
We are. Well, and I think that that's so something that was so special about this that we talked about a little bit before is that the experience of watching WandaVision was totally changed watching it in the pandemic. And not
Yes.
just, I mean, there was something, we talked about this before, but the release of these Marvel's like Disney Plus original series was a perfect timing for them because they get revenue and new streams and new memberships through it that they weren't going to get otherwise. We get a fuck ton of Marvel content that we weren't going to get, which was incredible. And now we're watching this show about grief and about finding yourself and about coming out of one of the darkest points of your life, about causing a bunch of pain to the people around you and coming out of that in a year where we're having so many different elements of grief and pain, right? Not just with the pandemic, but we have, I mean, you were just talking about how on your first episode of your podcast, you were talking about the events of in Georgia, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's, I mean, that's something that's always been relevant and always been important, but just in the last few months are we really starting to talk about what AAPI hate means. Just in the last year are we seeing a huge national conversation about violence against Black people and about violence perpetrated by cops. And while those are not direct themes in WandaVision, I think there's a lot of parallels there in terms of shedding an old world, right?
Right.
Shedding old things. That I think is Marvel hasn't done that before. They haven't done something that is so poignant to real life experiences.
Yeah. And it's what a perfect way to start doing it with the IP that has been most successful for them now. You know, like what better way to do that with characters that we all have been so invested in the past decade to give us an opportunity to really like talk about these things, you know, to really, really, really actually talk about these things deeper than just the heroes that we love. You know, and I'm sure, you know, down the road you and I are probably going to get together again and talk about Falcon of the Winter Soldier because
Yes.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But just staying on WandaVision specifically, like just the, because you talking about growth and I'm talking about loss and grief, there's even more themes in the show about friendship, about relationships, about handling yourself in the face of perseverance. You know, there's so many general themes that are in this show to love and learn from. And love, yeah, just love generally. There's so many different things in the show that are important, that hold weight, and that is what makes the show so damn beautiful. And I'm sure is the reason why you and I are so enthralled to have this conversation tonight, because this isn't just a show. You know, this isn't going and watching Breaking Bad. You know,
Yeah.
this show did something for us as MCU fans and as people that care about these things,
Hmm.
that we finally got to see it manifested into content that we care about, into a world that we care about, and people that we care about inside of this content, this media, these characters that are so close to our hearts, you know. And I feel like that's my biggest takeaway from the show. Really, is just that they did such a good job in utilizing this world that we give a fuck about to talk about things that we give a fuck about, that we
Yes.
should give a fuck about. And we
Mhm.
talked about it earlier. Disney never had the balls to do it. They never
Yeah.
had the balls to talk about these things, like not handling a relationship well, to, you know, looking at Falcon the Winter Soldier now, talking about whether or not, you know, the world's ready for a black Captain America. You know, like these are
Mhm.
important conversations, and I'm just blown away that the MCU is sort of their gateway to finally touch us that way. I want to give you the opportunity now to kind of like turn this into your sort of conversation piece a little bit. I know you had some
Yes.
things that you wanted to talk about specifically, so please take the chair.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so excited. I there is so much, and I think that there's so much around. We keep coming back, like we're kind of bouncing between WandaVision and the greater MCU because that's always the place that I feel like Marvel fans find ourselves in because no single Marvel thing can just exist on its own.
Right.
It's all part of this bigger web. Um, and we're definitely going to get back to that because there's just so much there. But I really think that the place we have to start with WandaVision um, is the casting and the
Mm,
way that they have taken Wanda's story. Um, I'm always fascinated when I don't really read comic books, which I mean it's hard. You can't read all of the
right.
comic books.
Right. Of
You
course.
have to you have to go online and be like, "Hey, what happened in this comic book?" and read a wiki page on it, which I do. And so I'm always fascinated when I look up, like before this, I was like, okay, what is up with Wanda? Because we just know inherently that there are so many different ways to take any given character,
Of
right? There are so
course.
many different, I mean, Spider-Man's a great example because there are 50 bajillion different Spider-Men and they're different colors and different ages and different live in different cities and it's all so confusing and you never know what Spider-Man they're using. And WandaVision is a character that is super interesting because I feel like she is pretty continuous throughout the comic books in terms of like her powers and um that she is undoubtedly one of the most powerful superheroes in Marvel in the
Yes.
comics,
Yes.
and definitely what they've brought to the MCU. They had to have her disappear in the blip because if she was there, she would have destroyed Thanos.
Oh, I
There would have
mean,
been no
we saw what happened to Thanos right when she did come back, and the only reason he got out of it was because of the rockets that he called down to wreck everything.
yeah,
Otherwise, he
yeah.
would have gotten lit the fuck up, you know? Like he wouldn't have survived the end of that battle if it was just 1v1 her and him and Wanda.
Yeah.
Absolutely, she's the most powerful. One of the most powerful, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And but what is different in different Wanda comics is kind of different aspects of her origin story and how she gets to realizing her powers and stuff like that. And I think that's something that's fun with the MCU is that um they really have such liberty to kind of pick and choose what they do. That also what they did with Wanda, they shot themselves in the foot because they picked and chose in a way that was completely ignorant. Um, so specifically, what I'm talking about is, I think the best way to put it is the whitewashing of Wanda Maximoff. And I'm going to give a little bit of backstory because I was confused when I started hearing some of the conversations about it. Because when I went into, I'll be completely honest, when I went into watching WandaVision, I did not know she was supposed to be Romani,
Mhm.
right? And that was on me for assuming that that she was white because I saw Elizabeth Olsen here being Wanda, but she's not supposed to be white. And well, and that's what's complicated about Wanda because in the MCU movies, she is from this country that they made up, Sokovia, right? Which is
Hmm.
supposed to be an Eastern European country. So then it's kind of like, okay, maybe they're making a white version of Wanda, which why you needed to do that? You didn't need to do that. That's already not cool. But then they have elements of her story that do seem to follow the Romani backstory, right? Her
Yes.
costumes in WandaVision are Romani inspired costumes. Um and so I was starting to hear these things and I had to take a step back because I was like, oh wow, I made an assumption about what Wanda was because of what they showed me on the screen. And obviously that was wrong. So I went back and was looking into different like different variations of Wanda in the comics, right? Trying to see where she came from and get a better understanding of what exactly went wrong when Marvel brought her to the screen. And there were a lot of things. One thing I found very interesting that I did not know. So in WandaVision, they bring in Quicksilver, right? Or
Yes.
is that his name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Quicksilver. Yeah.
So and they bring in Evan Peters from the X-Men movies. I lost my shit. I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
because now they have Fox rights,
Yeah.
right?"
Yeah.
Disney owns Fox now. So we've been waiting to see how they're going to bring in X-Men and we're like, "Are they bringing in Evan Peters? Is he going to be in Marvel now?" And it's which we still don't have an answer to that. But what I didn't realize was that Quicksilver is Wanda's brother.
Hmm.
So in the MCU, the way that they presented it, because the Quicksilver that we know in X-Men is obviously a mutant, right? And
Right.
in the MCU, they weren't allowed to be mutants because they didn't have that
Hmm.
licensing.
Hmm.
And so they were experimented on by Hydra voluntarily.
Yes.
And this is what was super fucked up when I started to go back is that they're in the comic books, they are the children of they're Jewish and Romani,
Hmm.
right? They're the
Yes.
children of
Magneto and Natalia. Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
And so I already was upset because I was like, wow, she is supposed to be Romani, and you have this whole thing where they're doing this weird accent thing where she has a Russian accent and she's from this made up country, and there's this. And then you find out that they are not just Romani, but also German and voluntarily signed up for a Nazi experiment?
Yeah. Yeah.
What the fuck, Marvel?
Yeah.
You couldn't have figured out a different way? You had to that's not okay.
Yeah. I mean, so it's a tough conversation to have, mainly because I can see where like their fuck up kind of came along in them saying, okay, look, like we know that this character is Romani. Do we really want to portray a Romani person as a witch? I can see where that was their initial fuck up because and granted a little bit understandable because I can see sort of the crux of that situation where they say, okay, well, we're kind of fucked either way that we go, but we have to have this character in this universe because people love this character. Like, this is a part of our huge expanded universe. I can see why they had to even have this hesitancy to go about things in a very specific manner, to say the least. Okay. With that said, too, now there's also a lot of different things that we can look at here when in comparison to the comics. So, she is the daughter of Natalia Maximoff, who is the original Scarlet Witch, who is the daughter of the Scarlet Warlock, I believe is his name. And now, also too, apparently no longer the daughter of Magneto. I guess they retconned that in the story where he eventually admitted that no, you're not actually my child, but she still is the daughter of Natalia, who is a Romani woman, and so it's interesting, even just looking at it just blatantly perfectly from there, right? So the consensus originally was like she's from Serbia. her and her mother from Serbia. She was taken from a group of alien people, to not dive too deep into the details on that, and then was taken into this camp in which her and her brother were experimented on as mutants. Okay. And all details aside, I have a hard time already really getting behind Disney representation, and I know that my homeboy Island Style, who was on my last episode's podcast, said the exact same thing. It's very hard to be completely supportive of the representation that Disney gives towards marginalized people of all sorts, because you can kind of see it as a repeating pattern in a majority of their content when it comes to even Moana being a very loose retelling of an ancient Polynesian lore, and kind of taking it in a different direction that is like, okay, there's an argument to be had that like Maui is specifically a Hawaiian god and not a Polynesian god, and so on and so forth. We've seen it before in Lilo and Stitch with Hawaiians, and just very lightly touching on what Hawaiian culture is about. We've even seen it in a lot of recent movies, talking about like all sorts of different race topics and such that are only so deeply touched on. They kind of glide across the surface here. And you can see that a lot of it is because they're trying to give this form of representation without skating this line too closely. And I can see that that's where they stumbled when it comes to Wanda specifically, because they were in a situation of, we are going to get a lot of shit no matter which direction we take this, which route is the safest route, which sucks because in this sort of scenario, they very easily could have said, look, this is what the character is. And we mean no offense, because this is a matter of the original MCU comics. I feel like a big part of where I'm coming from with this is that they should have just committed. They should have just said, look, Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff is Romani in the MCU. This is what is canon. This is what we wanted. They should have casted a Romani woman to play as this. Granted, I still love the MCU. I still love Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch, as Wanda Maximoff. My grievances aren't with that. My grievances are with the higher ups, with Marvel inside of Disney, making these executive decisions that are very just, do we want to go there? And as we've been talking about for the past hour now, they've only very lightly gone there before in ways that, yes, they matter, but should they have gone there when it comes to these smaller things that are actually really big?
And I think something that we really need to talk about, because what we're really talking about here is representation, right?
Yes.
That's the conversation. And I find it so funny. I even just like talking to people about when I first started hearing about the issues with Wanda and with the casting and the portrayal and all of those things, I heard it in a way that was like people saying, oh, well, I'm not going to watch that because I heard that it was that they didn't cast her correctly and this, that, which is fair. I think that there are times when cancel culture definitely has its place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
However, you don't see white ass movies getting that sort of critique. I mean, there are times when white cast movies are like, when most or all of the characters are white, when there is critique drawn to that. But for the most part, if you have a cast of all white people, they're not saying, oh, you weren't white in the right way, or oh, there are much smaller conversations about adding more people of color to cast and stuff like that, because it's this weird kind of, I mean, we live in a white supremacist society, and so the white has been the standard. And then when we have characters of color coming in, with Black Panther and things like that, there's so much more critique. Someone was telling me they aren't going to watch Bridgerton because the Black people in it are too light skinned. And I was like, and this was a white person telling me this. And I'm like, honey, I don't think that's your call to make.
Thank you, because that was my immediate reaction just now. I was like, excuse me? Like,
right? And And also, I was like, what do you mean the Duke is light skinned? Honey, you and I are light skinned. Like, I don't know. I don't think that that's, especially as white people, like, come the fuck on. Like, you're not going to
Right.
watch it because it wasn't, I don't like, you're trying to be, you're trying to be woke or whatever, and it's not happening. Which I don't think that we should be trying to be woke. We should be having actual conversations about what we want to see in representation and what representation means. Um, Bridgerton was not Black stories. That's a very valid critique. Saying we want Black stories told by Black people with Black characters, that is a critique. The thing with WandaVision, the critique there is you have this weird character that is kind of Romani, and you're absolutely correct. They didn't commit.
Mhm.
They at first they were like, oh, she's not going to be Romani, and then over time they were like, oh, but we're gonna put Romani influences into her wardrobe and into different parts of her characteristic and her backstory, and
Right.
take things from the comics that were had to do with her being Romani. And we can enjoy WandaVision and we can really appreciate it as a show, and also say that Marvel needs to do better. Disney needs to do better.
Mhm.
I've grown up loving Disney. I said that. I love watching Disney movies. I love watching Pixar. And they fucking fall short at everything.
Oh yeah, all the
Um,
time, all the
when
time.
it all the time. I swear to God, if I see another article if I see another article that is like, "Oh, Disney has its first gay character." Disney has had its first gay character like 5 times,
like
and I'm like,
like
"I what?"
8 times they've done it now.
And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Disney finally cast a Black lead. Disney finally cast an Asian lead. We finally have, this princess and that princess." And they fall short,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And I think that the real problem is that, we were talking earlier about how watching The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, these bitches did their research. Like they were there, someone is on social media reading our
Mhm.
Twitter
Mhm.
threads and reading our fan fiction, and they're putting that shit into the show. They know what we want. So like we're seeing that with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think most, where we're seeing things that we've been talking about on the internet forever, and they're integrating it into the show.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, why can't you do that with representation?
Well,
Right.
it kind of harkens back to, the conversation that we've all been having on the importance of accountability. I feel, these conversations, even this conversation that we're having here and conversations like this are pivotal in making sure that massive companies that create content, that create media that we all consume, making the right decisions is super important. And it's okay to fuck up. It's
Yeah.
okay to mess up. It's okay to make stupid dumbass mistakes, like thinking that the right direction was to just ignore that she's Romani and just non-canonize it. It's okay to make these dumbass mistakes as long as you tread the waters correctly going forward. And you can kind of see, as you mentioned, that the conversation when it comes to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, talking about a lot of really socioeconomic issues that we've been seeing in the past just 2 years, even,
Mhm.
and way, 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 way before that too. The the interesting part of this conversation is talking also about representation when it comes to minorities amongst minorities. And I think
Mhm.
there's a very, very important discussion to be had when it comes to people like Romani people that are so easily put on this weird nuanced pedestal in conversations when it comes to race and stuff, because when we talk about race we talk about very openly about black people and Latin people and gay people and Asian people, and we have these very big, like, main portions of these conversations, but it's very rarely talked about with, you know, Guatemalan people, with Romani people, with uh people that non-binary people even are a
Yep.
huge conversation. that doesn't really happen very like often enough. And there's a whole group of people that don't have these conversations happen for them. I mean, like, we still have people all the time saying gypsy,
Yeah.
excuse me, but like as a normal part of their language. And it's an
Right.
and even if my sister's watching this and my friend Daniel is watching this at any point, they will attest to this. I call them on this shit so often where I'm
Yeah.
like, don't say that. You can't say these things because it's offensive. And just because you haven't ran into a Romani
Right.
person that has straight up told you this isn't okay, you can't say that,
Right.
doesn't mean that, like, we all need to be better about having these things on the forefront of our minds. And when it comes to the conversation about accountability and making sure that these massive media companies are keeping this at the forefront of their minds, this is where these conversations are important, because we're not trying to crucify Disney. That's not my interest here.
Right.
We're still going to watch MCU stuff. I'm done talking about going and rewatching the newest episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier tonight, probably. But when it comes to these things specifically,
Mhm.
there's a level of knife that we have to have out when it comes to this battle. And
Yeah.
they're never going to fix these issues until we are consistently all as a group telling them, hey, we get it, you fucked up, now you need to fix this, you need to do better.
Right.
And now, before I pass this back on to you, an interesting
Mhm.
part of this as well is this, specifically with Wanda and WandaVision and
Mhm.
her character. It's tough because they honestly can't fix it without making things worse at this point.
Yeah.
And so now it's to a point where they don't have any other choice but to commit, because if they try to backtrack now, they're only going to shoot themselves in the foot even more. Because imagine, Jenesy, that they try to make her Romani after this.
Oh, yeah,
They
no.
they say, no, you're not actually from Sokovia. Those were not your parents in WandaVision. You're actually from your mother, Natalia, who
Right.
is not from Sokovia. And imagine the burst of shit that will happen if they decide to make that dumbass decision.
Yes. Oh, yeah, no, it's terrible. Well, yeah, no, there is no with the casting that they have currently and the storylines they are following currently, there my dog is freaking out, so give me 1 second.
That's okay. Do your thing. Do your thing. Hi, guys. Xantho, I see you. Hello. Sorry I replied so late. Hello.
So, yeah, there's no way that they can do that without causing a massive shitstorm. You're absolutely right. And also, what you're saying about the slur for Romani people, it's really interesting because as I was doing the research into the backstory of it, I was reading some things about the casting of Elizabeth Olsen and saw some things about things she has said in interviews. She has used the slur
Yes.
in interviews and describes Wanda's outfit, even from the first Avengers movie that she was in, Age of Ultron, describes her outfit in that movie as being that slur inspired,
Mm-hmm.
right? So being Romani inspired, but she used the slur.
Yes.
And that's absolutely inappropriate. I don't know how she really just doesn't I can't does she not know? Right? Like, I can't imagine that she like, is no one having these conversations with her? Um, is she not seeing these things on the I don't know how you can play a character and be in that universe and see all of the things from fans and on the internet and not know that. I mean, as soon as I started looking into the backstory of Scarlet Witch, first thing that I saw, I didn't even have to type in Romani. I just typed in Scarlet Witch backstory, and Romani was the third word in the sentence.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I also think that what you're bringing up is a really good point of being able to recognize when we make mistakes. There's a big thing happening right now of a tendency, not just in terms of to other people, but to ourselves of, and I see this all the time being a white person and having a lot of white family and friends, is that there's a tendency to say, oh no, I don't do that. Right? Oh, I'm not racist. Oh no, I don't say those things. I don't do those things. Um, which in my opinion and from my understanding of the learning that I've done, that's more harmful. And that's, I think, what Marvel and Disney often fall into is the, oh no, I didn't do that. See, we did this other thing and it was really great, where they should be taking the time to be like, I mean, I will be completely honest with you. When I started doing like when I started hearing these things about WandaVision, I was completely ignorant to what the Romani people, to who the Romani people were, and to what the significance of the Romani culture is.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
was completely ignorant. I didn't understand that term was a slur. I didn't know that,
Yeah.
and I felt so stupid. Doing like learning those things and being like, wow, how was I walking around not knowing this? Once you start learning about the Romani people and the um like all of the persecution that they've have faced and are currently facing, and we're not talking about it. Um, and I had no idea. And so I could sit here and say, "Oh yeah, I wasn't talking about it, but I knew. I knew this whole time, but I didn't." Right? And in that makes me complicit in the harm. Marvel is complicit in the harm against the Romani people for the way that they are telling the Scarlet Witch's story and for the casting that they chose.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, it begs, it really begs the discussion of, as you said, like the balance between holding people accountable and allowing them to learn and grow from it. Because then, as we mentioned earlier, unfortunately, this isn't really something that they can kind of fix. They're gonna have to just commit to the fact that she's from Sokovia, and not while also not doing little tiny things like they did in WandaVision.
Mhm.
Again, spoilers, guys. There's the scene on the Halloween episode where they say, "What is your costume of?" And she says, "I'm a Sokovian fortune teller," which, in context, for anybody that had no clue that Wanda was supposed to be Romani in the comics, that Scarlet Witch is a Romani person in the original stories, would think nothing of it.
Right.
Like, oh, goofy little callback, right? Because anybody who even just loosely knows about Scarlet Witch in the comics would just say, yes, like her costume was based off a fortune teller outfit, and so it's like they wouldn't think twice about it. But that's exactly what we're talking about when it comes to the erasure of an entire group of people that don't get the conversations that they deserve to have. And so, yeah, in this situation, Disney unfortunately are just going to have to commit and shut the fuck up and just move on with her being Sokovian, and
Yeah.
just please don't go there. Don't go there, because at this point, I'm sure, and I can't speak for them because I am not Romani, but I'm sure a part of me, based on being a person of color and being a marginalized person, I wouldn't want them to go there after the fact now. Like, if
Yeah.
there was a Hawaiian MCU character or an island MCU character that they very loosely based on it, and then later on gave him Hawaiian fire dancing garb, I'd be like, okay, really? Like, that's not the way to fix this. That's not the way to fucking fix this.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think it's there now. It's the point now where it's like, okay, you guys just need to not even touch this anymore. Just let Scarlet Witch be Scarlet Witch. Give us the story that you need to give us when it comes to her and Vision and the Darkhold and so on and so forth, and we will just take it running from there. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, too, though, I still enjoy the content that Disney is giving us, regardless of them fucking up. I do. I
Mhm.
do. But as you mentioned earlier, they need to stop. They need to do better. Like, it's like we're talking like 2021 now. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone on social media, everywhere, is having these conversations. We're all talking about this shit. We're all like we just went through an entire like worldwide discussion on AAPI hatred. And
Yeah.
prior to that, we went through an entire cycle of everyone talking about Black Lives Matter. And every time we see this, every time when it comes to Pride Week, when it comes to Heritage's months, like for all people of color, when it comes to anything that is representative of any marginalized person, it's the same thing every time. We talk about it, people talk about it that are not part of these groups, and then it goes off into the wayside to not be talked about it until the following event that happens or the following year
Right.
when they can celebrate it again. And don't get me wrong, I love the idea that we get holidays to celebrate us. That's a part
Mhm.
of us being treated as human beings. But for fuck's sake, this it's not hard to just recognize people as people and to give them the attention that they deserve to have as marginalized people of all kinds. And when it comes to this situation, talking about Disney never really treading these waters well enough, it's like when are you guys gonna have this shit figured out? When are you
Yeah.
going to have this shit figured out? Real quick, I have someone in the chat here, a good friend Xantho, who was talking a little bit about what we were mentioning earlier. They say in the TV show The Riches, 2007 to 2008, they use the concept of a Romani family who take on the facade of a rich family in a gated community, and they even use that term. They don't explain that the culture of Romani people are not that slur. They make it seem as if the Romani culture are thieves and pickpockets and liars, which, unless you do the proper research and look into a culture, you will never truly understand. That's exactly what we're talking about. So it's like the media representation of marginalized peoples is obviously going to be appreciated, but if you don't take it and do it the right way, you're
Mhm.
actually doing more damage than you are helping. And
Yes.
and that goes right back to what I was saying earlier. I am so hesitant when it comes to supporting the representation that Disney gives marginalized peoples, because that's what it
Mhm.
is a majority of the time. A
Yeah.
majority of the time, they skate across the surface just enough to say, "Hey, we're doing this, we're doing this," and then
Disney
it's not actually about that. It goes into the bread and butter elsewhere, you know?
Disney is very reactionary, and they are taking the stance that is heavily criticized. I don't know how they're still doing this because I feel like everybody at this point knows that what we do not want to see is the kind of like, you know, obligatory representation, right? Oh, we were criticized for not having gay people, so we put this weird homophobic gay person into Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted that. The straights didn't want that. The gays didn't want that. Nobody wanted that. Um, right? Like, oh, we were criticized for not having enough people of color in movies, so we put two black people in this movie
Oh,
and don't have
Jesus
any Asian people,
Christ,
don't have
yeah.
any, you know, that's not what it's about. And I think that, a good place for us to kind of end this conversation is I'm thinking while we're having this conversation is how can they do better? How can Disney do better? And how can Marvel do better? And it's not as simple as creating characters that are in these marginalized identities that we're talking
Oh,
about, as far as I'm concerned. Especially like I can talk from the perspective as a queer person. What I want to see is I want to see queer actors being hired to play queer characters, and I want queer writers. I want queer fucking consultants. In terms of we're talking like very easily they could have avoided this entire thing if they brought on like people from the Romani culture as consultants, like Romani people, to talk about how can we best represent this character,
yeah,
right? And multiple, multiple consultants, not just one, because there's so many different perspectives from any different community.
right.
Having, I mean, you don't just have one writer on a script, so why would you do that for anything else?
Yeah, bias exists, you know. I wish it wasn't so, but unfortunately, guys, you need more than just one perspective here. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think consultants of people that are within that group that you're trying to represent correctly are super important. It's just a matter of doing your studying. Just do your fucking studying. Like like you see video games go through
Right.
rigorous studying. Like, I mean, one of my favorite games on the planet is the Division 2, and they spent a year and a half taking a majority of their development team to Washington D.C. to make sure that the architecture and the major like landmarks of the city looked exactly the way that it need to look and were represented correctly. They did all this studying to make sure that it was perfectly on the dot of what it needed to be. And they do it sometimes in movies. They, unless it's being written or directed by a person of that group, a lot of times they don't. They just don't do their studying. And it's unfortunate because even I used Moana as an example earlier. They had a lot of Polynesian people involved in the production of the film, so that's why I give it a little bit of the space that it needs, because my people were involved in our people were involved in creating that movie to give it the representation that we felt that we wanted to give out. Okay, you guys get that way, but fucking burn this world to the ground if we have a straight white man direct a movie about gay people and doesn't do his fucking work to make sure that he gets consultants that are queer to talk about how we can best represent this group of people in a way that is not harmful, in a way that is actually going to benefit people and get people an opportunity to learn about this group of marginalized peoples, so that we do not do them injustice. It's not that hard. There's tons of marginalized people that are wanting to work in the movie industry, that are wanting to work in the gaming industry, that would happily do what they have to do to give the representation the correct way. And it's like, it almost just, because it's not on the forefront of their mind, because we're talking specifically about minorities amongst minorities, because it's not a main group that is majorly typically on the forefront of a lot of people's minds, they get cast off into the wayside. And then you see companies start making excuses like, we couldn't find any Romani people. We couldn't find people that would want to be involved. Like, fucking shut up. Shut the fuck up.
Where were you looking that you couldn't find anyone?
On LinkedIn? You looked on LinkedIn for 2 hours and no Romani people today. Guess we can't do it. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, come on, man. It's just this weird repeating trend every single time. Some company will fuck it up somewhere, and then we tell them, and they say, fuck, we're sorry, we'll fix it, we'll go about this better going forward, and then it's a new fucking company that does the same goddamn thing, and we have to tell them over again, and so on and so forth. And it's tiring. It's tired. It's a tired conversation. And it's disappointing that we even have to be talking about that when it comes to one of the biggest major media companies on the planet, using one of the biggest IPs in human history, in media history, and they could not go about this correctly. And it's like, it begs the question too of, do they think that just having Black characters being casted with Black people, that's enough? Like, it's not enough. Like, it's not enough to have a Romani person be casted to play a Romani character. It's not. It's just not.
That's the bare minimum.
Yeah, it's the least we should be able to expect coming from a company that is wanting to represent people correctly. And so, like, it's this crazy, wild, weird double-edged sword where it's like, yes, they're doing the work the right way when it comes to some things, but when it comes, and I'll segue into this next little part of this here, is it's not mattering on little ways that it should matter, that are actually surprisingly easy to just get a consultant, get a group of consultants, do some A/B testing, do some research. You have hundreds of people that are involved in the development of these entertainment pieces, and it's absurd now to this point that they couldn't stop and think, we love Scarlet Witch. Oh, wait, she's fucking Romani, and we should probably look into that. Shouldn't we fucking look into that? I mean, like, it's absurd. It's absurd to this point. And again, I don't want any of the viewers or listeners at home to at all think that I'm at all trying to just pin Disney onto a fucking cross or whatever, because honestly, when it comes to a lot of the things that we talk about with Disney, there's bigger fish to fucking fry. When it comes to this talk with the Romani situation and Wanda, this is the bigger fish to fry, because like this is what we as marginalized people are always trying to echo off of each other, is when are we going to get the representation that we want in the way that we deserve it? Period.
Yes.
Period.
And this was an opportunity for representation that was stolen. From the Romani people. You know? I mean, Scarlet Witch is a Romani superhero, and that was just whoosh, under the carpet.
Yeah. And you know, like, bless their hearts for fucking trying in the beginning, I guess, to not let it go there. Just, okay, guys, we'll make up a fictional country that
made up a whole country.
They made up a whole ass country to do two things: give a backstory to a character that already had a backstory, and to give us the Sokovia Accords. Great. They used it for 2 major plot beats.
I will say though, when Marvel commits to something, they fucking commit, because Sokovia is coming up. Sokovia keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Sokovia will not die. The Sokovia is the only country. It's the United States and Sokovia.
Yeah. That's it. Well, and
in Wakanda.
Yeah, in Wakanda. Yeah, in Wakanda. Yeah.
Country.
Yep. Yeah, I know.
One time we went to Tokyo. Yeah. Tokyo's gone now. We're back
I know. We have to. Godzilla and Kong have that. They'll take care of Tokyo. It's fun.
And think about this. Sokovia exists. So Sokovia comes up more than Wakanda does.
Yeah.
In the MCU. Wakanda's not a real country, to be fair. But Sokovia was literally invented to give Wanda and Pietro Maximoff a home.
Yeah. And then create some discourse for one of the movie setups, and that's it. That's it. And so like you mentioned, now they mention it a lot now. So it's like almost as if at some point, I don't know, maybe in Infinity War, they eventually said, "Hey, we got to use Sokovia for a little bit more than just making a backstory for Wanda. What can we do with it? Oh, I got it. Let's just write Sokovia into every other line for the rest of the MCU content." I mean, like, even in fucking, like, Falcon of the Winter Soldier now, I'm pretty sure in the past 2 episodes that you've seen, they mentioned Sokovia, like, 4 fucking times. 4 fucking times. Like,
honestly, they wrote the script, and they were like, insert country. We'll come back to this later. And then some intern came through and was like, just did a Command F, insert country. Sokovia. And that was how we got our script.
They just photoshopped Sokovia into every script thing, yeah.
Also, the more I think about it, Sokovia is like their breeding ground for villains. Because the Civil War villain, who came back in the episode from last night that I haven't watched yet.
They haven't watched yet, yes.
Was from Sokovia.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, it's weird. It's fun. Well, and
Pietro started off as villains.
We're villains. They were villains. Yes. And so it's just like brain melting to think about. We're just kind of like, what? Like, you guys really did all that just because you could have literally just given the world that the comics had already fucking given us and done all this still. All of this still you could have fucking done, whether or not Sokovia ever fucking existed. And like, I appreciate them too, because after they created Sokovia for the films, the comics started using Sokovia, and it's like that's not the movie should have done, guys. That's not the fucking movie. I don't know. The whole Sokovia talk is just
enough countries. There weren't enough countries.
Yeah, of course.
Countries in the UN wasn't enough.
Yeah,
we had to create.
I know. We needed to make a new country for the Avengers to go to, because they had destroyed other cities and countries enough prior to ever going to Sokovia. Sorry, guys. We had to make we were tired of destroying real countries. We had to just come up with a fake one for us to destroy next. It's
fascinating.
I know. Well, I mean, with that said, though, like, it's. as I repeated a couple of times, I don't want anybody to think that we're just sitting here trying to piss all over fucking Disney, because that's not the
No,
case. It's
no.
important to have these discussions in order for everyone to recognize where, even as you said, you never really looked into this until you started looking into it for WandaVision, and it came across, and you've realized, wow, this is actually an important fucking thing. And
Yes.
I'm sure a lot of people have done the exact same thing. Even I'm sure there's some people that are watching this, have will watch it in the future, that are like, oh fuck, I didn't even realize she was supposed to be Romani. Because there's a lot of people that enjoy the MCU and have never read the comics, that don't
Yeah.
know the backstory to a majority of the fucking characters. And so it's like, it's important for us to have these discussions on platforms like this, where we can talk openly about, hey, this is a thing, and we need to remind you that this is a thing, so that all of us collectively, as a group of people that give a fuck, can make sure that Disney starts giving a fuck going forward. And so that's, I'm very glad that we were able to talk about that, because it's a fucking shame. And as a minority, as a person of color, as a marginalized person, I watch these things from the outside of just my own perspective, and think, wow, that would fucking suck. And I know that because it fucking sucks for me. And it's like that level of empathy that you don't even necessarily need to have. It should just be the standard for
Mhm.
all these sort of things. It's I'm glad we were able to talk about that, because I think that's a very important part of the whole WandaVision discussion, that people aren't really going to have on the
Yeah.
forefront of their mind when talking about WandaVision. Because yeah, we loved the show, we loved the themes,
Mhm.
we loved the characters, we love
Oh
everything
yeah.
that the MCU has built.
Yeah.
But this is fucking important, guys. This is
Absolutely.
important as shit. We need to make sure that everyone remembers. So, did you have anything else that you wanted to kind of close out with?
I guess the only thing before we move on is just, thanks for providing a space where we can talk about that, because you're right. It's an absolutely necessary conversation. And I just want to thank you for having that conversation with me and making space for that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank you for bringing it up too, because I know that, like, this podcast specifically, this show, that going forward, like, we're always up for talking about these things. We are a video game and movie media, podcast. Like, we enjoy these things. We like to talk about these things, but as a lot of people that have watched this before, or talked to me about it, we are marginalized people first, and even though we're fans of these things are super fucking important. And I am always more than welcoming to anyone that wants to have a conversation when it comes to these topics. So absolutely, thank you. Thank you for coming here to bring that up, because it's weighted. It needs to happen. It needs to happen. So yeah, any
Absolutely.
closing thoughts? Anything you wanna end on here?
Um, so I do want to say we got into like the really heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Do we have a minute to talk about things that we loved about WandaVision?
Yeah, let's end on a good note here. Yeah, let's end on a good note here. What do you got for me? What are you thinking?
Okay, I'm trying to think about what we've talked about so far. I have a two-part question.
Okay.
Okay. First part, what was your favorite part of WandaVision? It could be a scene, character, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you most looking forward to that came out of WandaVision?
Oh, beautiful. I actually had a listener submission earlier that I was going to bring up here at the end, that literally asked basically exactly that. It comes
Okay.
from Stephen M. He asks, what do you guys think we can expect going forward in the world of WandaVision and the greater universe of MCU? Um, so let's start with my favorite part of WandaVision. I had a few. One, Kat Denning, because she
Ah,
is an angel. Okay, she's wonderful in everything she ever does. Secondly, I think my main favorite part was actually Agatha. because because okay, there's a few reasons here. Okay, so one, What's her name? Catherine Hahn. Catherine Hahn is an incredible actress. She's a super underrated actress in
Oh
everything
yeah.
she's done prior to ever even being in WandaVision. Every part she's ever been in, I've loved. I fucking love every character she's ever done. But her
Mhm.
specifically playing as Agatha Harkness is incredible. It was so
It
good.
was.
The way the first half of just, oh my goodness,
Yeah, she's a
fucking god.
totally different person.
Yeah.
She's a totally different person.
Yeah, and she did it spot on.
Oh
Spot
yeah.
on. Go like transitioning between those two versions of her character so
Uh-huh.
well in a way that we could actually feel that switch from like, oh, I'm your weird quirky neighbor that you don't really understand why I'm so weird, to just being the
That
villain.
is also queer coded.
Yes.
Fun fact.
Yep. For everyone at home, we were talking about this early before the show started. There's a lot of MCU stuff that is, whoo, whoo. They get a
The
little,
MCU is
mm,
like the MCU is in the closet.
yeah, a majority of their fucking. I saw the way that Tony and Rhodey were talking to each other at a lot of points during the event. Ooh, mm, mm,
Ooh, yeah.
yeah. No, it's absolutely
I mean, Bucky and Captain America. Hello, Captain America's not straight. You can't. You can't.
mm,
He's. I don't.
I
I'm
don't.
not convinced that Captain America is even attracted to women. To be honest,
Well, yeah, no,
he ended up with a woman. We know that. I'll give him that.
right, but
That feels like socialization to me.
okay, fair enough. That's fair.
But yeah,
That's fair. That's fair. That's totally fair.
that's
He's
a totally different thing.
right.
Um,
Yeah, no, for me it would be Agatha. I think that the way that they were able to take this character that a lot of people were kind of just wondering when she was going to be here,
yeah,
because everyone was curious, like, when are we going to get Agatha Harkness, the person that trained Scarlet
right.
Witch in the comics, that taught her how to be a witch? Like, there's a lot of guesses on like when that's going to come around. They finally did it with an actress that killed it, that looked the part so well. They
Oh,
gave this amazing reveal of who she was, and like her interactions with Wanda in the show in general. They killed it with Agatha. They absolutely killed it. I loved it. I loved it. If I had a secondary one, and I was mentioning this to you earlier, my favorite scene of the show was when Vision and Vision were talking to each other about the theology of the Greek ship, and recognizing his weird little brain twist that he was trying to have on the not Vision. Well, I guess neither of them were Vision, so, hence the argument. Yeah, that scene was magnificent. The cinematography in that was amazing. The lighting work that they had throughout a majority of the fight that they had between those two leading up into that conversation, beautiful. I think a lot of my favorite parts of the show were really just the little moment to moment things that happen throughout the show that are just very like subtle, but when you think about it, you're like, oh fuck, that's actually really like heavy. It's really heavy. That's actually really important to the overall bulk of this. So, what about you? What was your favorite thing?
okay, so I also have a few. So you can't just walk away from WandaVision with one favorite thing.
Right.
Um, I too loved the I'm terrible with names, but the nerdy scientist from Thor. Her character is magnificent. She's so fun. She's very similar to Agent Chen. I love him. I love her. They're these like random like side characters that they're just bringing back because we loved them so much. Um, and so I loved them. Probably one of my favorite, like scene wise, or it was a whole episode. The episode where we go back through Wanda's memories and you see
Mm-hmm.
her dealing with grief at different stages in her life was incredible to me because that is what grief is like. Every
Right.
time
Right.
you experience a new grief, all of your old griefs come. And you're like, Jesus, why am I crying over someone who died when I was 12?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that portrayal of her grief, all of the memes that came from that episode destroyed me. Everything when
Ugh.
Vision is talking to her, what is What is grief if not love persevering?
Oh, Jesus Christ! Oh, my heart!
Jesus Marvel.
Oh my God!
They destroyed me. I was like,
My partner who hasn't even watched the show saw me tweeting about it the moment it happened in the episode, and she hadn't watched it at all, and she even told me, like, I haven't even watched this damn show, and that, just reading that makes me want to cry. And I was like, right,
yes,
holy fuck, the writing in the show was so good. Oh my God.
yes, yes. So yeah, that that was incredible. And then of course we come to the end of that, where that episode ends with, Wanda, you're the Scarlet Witch. And we all know she's the Scarlet Witch, but no,
Right.
she knows this.
She said the thing. She said the thing. She said it. Oh God, she said
Every
it.
Marvel fan, like every like half hour into any Marvel thing, we're like, you said it. You said the thing. You did the thing. You wore the thing.
I know.
It's so much fun. As far as favorite characters, my favorite character, you mentioned Agatha Harkness. What's her name? Is it Hargrave or it's Harkness?
Harkness, yeah. Agatha Harkness, yes.
Yeah. Hargrave is the bad dude, right?
Yes.
I get names so confused.
It's okay. It's okay. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them in this content.
There are so many. My favorite character, 10 out of 10, Monica Rambeau.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Monica
the
Rambeau.
Underdog of the entire show.
Oh, Monica Rambeau came out of nowhere and was like, hello, I'm the star. I know you've been waiting for me. And then ends up being a superhero?
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Well, and then did you see the post-credit scene at the very end of the show?
Oh, I think so.
So her meeting up with the scroll in the theater. There's a post-credit scene. Yeah.
I saw the one. Was that before or after Wanda is flipping through the...
It's after. So there's 3 post-credit scenes at the end on the final episode. Yeah, there's 3 post-credit scenes. So you get the one, again, this is a spoiler half, guys, I'm sorry. But there's the first one where it shows Scarlet Witch with the Darkhold, insinuating the connection to the potential House of M canonization from the comics. The second one was Monica Rambeau talking to somebody, and they lead them off and say, hey, someone wants to talk to you. And it's insinuated at first that you think it's either going to be Captain Marvel or Nick Fury. And you walk into the theater, they turn around, and there's a person there, and they suddenly turn into a Skrull. And,
oh, no, I did see that. I did see that.
Okay. Yes. So that was amazing, setting up for the potential of Monica to finally get a reunion with Captain Marvel.
Which we know is happening.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're gonna give us another...
already... I don't know if it was announced that she... Well, I honestly was so confused. We knew Monica Rambeau was going to be coming back in the second Captain Marvel.
Right.
That was well known. I don't think we knew that she was going to become a superhero in WandaVision. I certainly didn't know that. I don't know if I just missed the Marvel memo.
I didn't think that it was going to happen so soon. Like, because I knew, just like based off like my reading, because that was a part of the Marvel comics that I never really got into, was Photon and Captain Marvel. Well, she's not called Photon in the comics, if I remember correctly, but I didn't think they were gonna do it off the dot. I thought that they're gonna spin into this being a part of Captain Marvel, and then once they get into Captain Marvel 2, then they're gonna kind of start giving an origin story. No, they said fuck it. This is Monica. You saw her in Captain Marvel as a kid. This is who she is now. She's sad. She's trying to figure this out, and now she has fucking powers. We got an origin story in a show.
That was an origin story.
There was an origin story in the show. They gave that to us. And they pulled it off really well. Surprisingly, holy fuck.
It was like origin story Inception. It really was. Because we were in so many ways learning Wanda's origin story. I mean, we've known her for years, but this really was, we got so much insight into like how she got to being with Hydra, where she went after that, and the times that we didn't get to see her, and then of course now coming into her full Scarlet Witch self, and then we got Monica Rambeau.
Yes, just the way that we need it to. I love it.
Yeah, I mean that is truly like I said this before, and you have really proclaimed that WandaVision is a gift. WandaVision is God's gift to this earth. Not only did it give us this beautiful story about grief and perseverance and love, and it gave us so many twists and turns, and Agatha and like the side characters that we love actually becoming more important, but we got Monica fucking Rambeau becoming a goddamn superhero.
The mind you too, the little girl that we didn't think was going to happen that way. She was the little girl in Captain Marvel, the niece, so to speak. And going from that into this show where she's a full grown adult, also grieving the loss of her mother, who we saw in Captain Marvel. So we're also grieving, like, fuck, her mom's dead, dude. Like, she was a main character in the movie. And so, oh god, they did so good with Monica. They really they did so good with all the fucking characters.
And then you have the added layer of Monica, of where you have Sword, which she was supposed to then become the director, but she was gone in the blip, and this asshole motherfucker is the director, and so then you have that added layer on it for her. I mean, it's just, yeah, they did so well with all of the characters.
All of them, except for Evan Peters. They kind of screwed him and us on that. Boner. His name was Boner.
I actually wouldn't go that far.
I know.
I feel like what they did is they teased us, and nobody likes to be teased, but they did.
I mean, that's totally fair. I don't particularly like being teased with Boner, but sometimes I am totally fine with it. With that said, guys, thank you so much for coming on to the show, Jenesy. You are amazing. Thank you. Are you down to do this for Falcon and the Winter Soldier when the show ends? Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, absolutely. We'll do another crossover episode for sure, because I would happily have you on to talk about some of the amazing shit they're doing with that show. You need to watch that new episode. You gotta watch that new episode.
I will text you tonight. It's happening tonight.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming in and hanging out with us to talk about this stuff. Jenesy is amazing, a wonderful guest. Go listen to her podcast. Tell the people at home where they can find you, by the way.
You can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, pretty much anything. We're on it. We are Let's Get Bitchin', and we're a good fucking time.
All right. You guys heard it. Go find it. Go listen. Again, thank you guys for coming in. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you to Jenesy for taking the time out of her day to talk about the wonder that was WandaVision. Tonight, I'm going to go eat some food. And then we're going to be coming back on right about like 8:45 to play some Outriders that you guys are more than welcome to come in and hang out with. We are setting up a whole ordeal where if we can get enough subscribers on the Good Kraken channel, we will do an Outriders giveaway next week. I have some friends that are going to be joining us for it. Go listen to Let's Get Bitchin'. They're talking about some great, wonderful things about media, about being queer, about being proud of these things and enjoying this stuff. Please go listen. You guys have been wonderful. And again, Jenesy, thank you so much. You guys have a great night.
Bye.